I'm Daljit Nagra, and I live in Harrow, in the borough of Harrow, northwest London.
And I'm Jamie Hale. I live in Lewisham, in the borough of Lewisham, in southeast London. So we're about as far apart from each other as we could have been, really.
Jamie, should we talk about the process? So we started in about November, didn't we? We got going great earnest, didn't we? We were writing right from the off.
I think we both like having a deadline and we both like being productive.
Yeah. Working together was really interesting. It's fun, wasn't it? We wrote. I would encourage everyone to do that. Actually, find someone to write with. It's not a competition. It's not about whether what you write is good or not. The actual process is really interesting, wasn't it? We wrote one called Lewisham and Harrow, and I've written down here one called Two Journeys.
Yeah, it was really good for me because working with someone else had to take me out of my own style a bit. I think you give yourself license to have a bit more fun on the page than I often do. And I found that quite challenging in a really provocative and interesting way.
Yeah, sometimes you're in a certain way of writing, aren't you? You get opened up, like working with you. So I've got used to writing a certain way and working the collaboration, thinking, well, how can we write? And already you're thinking outside of your usual way of imagining, aren't you? Because you're not working by yourself. So that's quite exciting, isn't it? That collaborative approach. We first one about Lewisham and Harrow. You wrote verses about Lewisham, and I wrote about Harrow. You wrote a verse. I wrote a verse. You wrote a verse. We wrote in response to each other in a way, didn't we?
We did. I think we were thinking about the parks, particularly. I know that for me, local park has been really sustaining during the pandemic. Once I felt it was safe enough to start going out cautiously, being able to kind of look right across London, from my local park, you can see into the city. You can see sort of Canary Wharf. You can really see that London still exists, even when it feels like you're in this really kind of atomized bubble. So
Mm.
I enjoyed us thinking about the differences and similarities, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. Likewise. I mean, I've got a park nearby, and having to articulate it into a poem, right, and verse by verse, I suddenly sort of thought up of things which were just habitual for me. You know, the way if you do the same thing every day, it's going for a couple of walks a day, so it becomes habit, doesn't it? And the writing actually makes you sort of step back and think, oh, what actually happens on that journey?
Yeah, it was interesting to pay that deliberate attention to something that can become quite automatic.
Mm. Yeah, I enjoyed that part, and we did that one about two journeys. Imagining walking from, for me, from Harrow to Lewisham, from you from Lewisham to Harrow. Oh. So let's talk about our little exchange. Most of our we wrote the poems, but also we wrote loads of exchanges, didn't we, in conversation about various things. So which we would call kind of like a long poem, and in a sense, we started talking about as our writing changed during the pandemic. I remember sort of reading again earlier. That was the first thing, and we weirdly, because I've spoken to a few people who during pandemic haven't actually written much because of the anxiety and brain not being settled. We both just wrote really perversely jubilant emails to each other about how we've been writing loads. You you wrote a play, didn't you, or something?
Yeah, I wrote a poetry pamphlet, a play, two half novels, and some significant other writing, which will hopefully come into the world in the future.
Yeah, so we've been really lucky, haven't we? Because I normally have my day job with university and various things, teaching and stuff. I've just been really busy, but with lockdown, I actually felt I had time to develop a project I've been working on. So we've been really lucky. I think we have to say that in terms of creativity, haven't we?
Definitely. I at the beginning of lockdown, I told myself that I could either be miserable about it or I could see it as an enforced creative retreat with lots of time and space to write. And I decided to go with the latter. I think it was helped by 6 months in hospital last year, teaching me what it was like to be locked down in one room for 6 months. Um, Meaning that this actually felt quite spacious in comparison. I haven't really felt the claustrophobia, which I think I've been very lucky, and I think that's given me space to imagine and create.
That's interesting because in our exchange, you talked about you felt you were physically moving, but through writing. So while you were in bed, whilst it was a kind of lockdown in itself, but also as an escape, a release, because words in the act of writing were moving you out through your limbs and your nerves. So that's kind of quite a physical, biological process for you.
Yeah, writing is a kind of expansion or explosion of the self, as a kind of motion. And with our poems, about our parks and our journeys and things, it was we were kind of in that motion, even if we were writing statically.
And then we talked. I guess we talked about identity issues, didn't we? About categories, how we feel about the categories we would fit in as writers, and this category. For me, it would be that I felt it would be BAME, and for you, it would be about disabilities. Yeah, because we don't want to be defined by it, do we? I don't want to be defined by race, as it were, because we all have a race, and we all, um, but the writing springboards from that, and it's ultimately about various things, isn't it? I always say my poems may have Asian characters, but they're love poems, some of them, and some are kind of protest poems or somebody thinking aloud in their head about certain issues, and mucking around. I don't know how you feel about your work in light of that.
I think it's so easy for kind of the dominant social voices, in kind of hierarchical structures of privilege to see writing that touches on issues that they perceive of as kind of what they would consider to be minority issues as being about those issues. I mean, I really love some of your love poems, and I was when I was thinking about Shield, I was talking to someone about it who said that they hoped that it would be seen as political poetry because it was, and the fact that it was personal and about being disabled in the pandemic didn't mean it wasn't also about politics and whose voices we value and how we value them. So I think there's that assumption that if you're writing from a voice considered to be minoritized, that your writing is first of all personal rather than being universal.
Yeah,
we all want to experience our lives as fully as possible. And the fact that I'm writing that in my pamphlet as a disabled person doesn't mean that that is a disabled issue. And there's that sense that you can be pigeonholed into being seen as someone who talks about your minority issues rather than universal themes from issuing from a perspective.
on one level it's about a person, but actually it's about all sorts of things, isn't it? Because we, the readers, should have the confidence to read other things into the text, shouldn't we? Beyond the literal statement. And if you just hold the literal meaning of the poem, it is about disability. That's really disappointing, isn't it? So it's the dullest reading in a way.
But it can also be an interesting door into something else. After reading some of your poetry, I've then gone on to research mythological characters and myths and kind of try to follow the kind of the inspirations and the roots, and found stories that I probably wouldn't otherwise have found. And it's been an absolute delight. It felt like being invited to look in through a window.
We had good fun, didn't we? It's just like letting go and having the confidence to let go. Just one thing I want to pick up on was I hadn't really thought about before. You talked about disability as being an oppression. It defines the oppression. Disability defines the oppression, but not the bodily experience.
Yeah. So we've all got bodies, and you and I both wear glasses. It would be reasonable to say that we did not have perfect vision. Somebody might consider that a visual impairment, though that category is generally used for people with quite significant visual impairments. But society doesn't change our lives in any way for wearing glasses. One can just live a completely normal life. There are no barriers placed in the way of people who wear glasses, in general, rather than people with more significant loss of vision. And so we're not disabled for it, even though our eyes aren't functioning in a way that would be considered optimal. And I don't see that there's much that can be done about my bodily experience. Where there is, then I make the decisions I make. But what I'm focused on very much, and what disabled people tend to consider disability, is the additional barriers placed in my way by society. So by my doctor deciding that I would be low priority for intensive care treatment, I question why it is that the experience of having what we could be considered a physical impairment leads to me facing these social barriers. So when I talk about myself as a disabled poet, I talk about myself as a poet who is facing these access barriers rather than describing my own experience.
And this is part of what's happened in the exchange, the education actually, through fun and humour actually, through writing for fun. And you suddenly learn something different about people, don't you? I mean, things I learned about disability or the politics of it, I might not have picked up otherwise. But it's that kind of conversation we've had, which we would encourage everyone to take part in, wouldn't we? Should we read our poem then, Jamie? No.
Let's. I thought this poem was quite. Because I think you wrote your half first, and when I read it, I was like, that's really funny, but I was also like, oh no, because I realised I'd have to write something back, and I'd never tried to write anything that silly in my life.
Brilliant. We did it anyway. So on the page, you niftily sort of put the two poems together side by side, haven't you? So like two columns. But in practice, so should I just read mine, then we'll finish with yours?
Go for it.
Okay. So this is both. We were talking about our writing process. So I thought we might as well write it as a poem. Where I've got this thing where I'm quite into the idea that anything speaks. So I've got my pen and the piece of paper of speaking. So the pen I used to write with, the Bic, talks, and the paper talks about how I'm always taking scraps of paper. I don't know how you write, Jamie. We'll hear a bit of yours in a bit. But I'm always taking off bits of paper to write a thought down and shove them in my pocket. And at some point I usually type them up or add them to a poem. So I'll read my kind of opera little thing or whatever it is. So there's going to be two speakers, pen speaks and paper speaks, and they come together. So it's Love Song of Pen and Paper, a glimpse into Daljit's writing habits. So pen speaks. I ain't no pen, I'm a Bic pen. Not common, just salt of the earth kind of ink kid. So long as I'm with Lid. So long as he keeps his lid on for the lyric graces. He writes verse with me first. Me and me clan, we're all black, compact in 50 box. The messy slob, I'm always getting lost. Pen and paper chorus to each other. He's no respect, he's so sacrilegious. Come over here and gives a kiss. Scrap of paper speaks. Messy ain't the half of it. Oh dearie, he doodles his lines on any old decollage of paper. Guardian corner, cereal box lid, recycled A4, and once, do you remember, he wrote lines in the arse page of an actual poetry book, tore it blinking out. Pen and paper chorus. He's no respect, he's so sacrilegious. Come over here and gives a kiss. Pen and paper have a solid smooch. Go back to their places in the back room, where their poet will return to slobber a rushed verse. Okay, I'm over to you now, Jamie.
Quick writing error. Got it off again. Typing fresh ideas. These fresh beginnings. Where's your old paper, mate? Every window's a new page. Some fresh way to start again. Cleverer than you. I can turn rough fingertip taps to something, print on paper. Wait, got it. Edit it. And back to the start. New line, new rhyme. Where's the word I need? Mate, I've got that in me too, a dictionary. Ain't nothing I don't know but creativity. And what do I need from that? Got a poet to play with words. I shine right through them. Different colours. Change it. New shape. They're writing again. Old handwriting. A fresh unwinding. What does this mean, mate? You tell me. Can't you see? I'm just ones and zeros. Just a clever code. And I know more than you think I do. I'm used to them writing through a poem and back to me too.
Yay! I got a dictionary in me. That's brilliant. That sums us up. We've been using our various dictionaries over this project, haven't we? And we encourage everyone else to use their various dictionaries and get in touch with other people. Brilliant. So I'm going to wish you luck with your pamphlet as well. So I look forward to seeing that.
Thank you so much. I really thank you. And thank you so much for this collaboration. I really feel like I've kind of grown in my understanding of myself as a poet, the kind of poetry I have, the space and the latitude to write, the ability to have fun with words. I feel like I've kind of grown in my understanding of your poetry, which is a real delight. And collaborating with someone like this has been really brilliant.
Yeah, because I mean, I enjoyed this because it wasn't competitive or any of that silly stuff. It's just two people having a good time and talking at a fairly intelligent level about the process of writing whilst writing as well. So it's a really exciting thing to bring the two forces together.
We were able to just to spread ourselves out, to throw things, to see what worked, what didn't. We'd taken that pressure off, which was really enjoyable.
Yeah, and what we produced was enjoyable enough. I thought it was good. So it worked for me. So it's great.
It worked for me, yeah.
Yeah, brilliant.